Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Whispers of the Deep. My name is Draken. Today, we're going over Lucian 1. Lucian 1 is the third chapter in the book, following directly the events of Ira 1 and Fortuna 1. The next chapter, however, will be Ekin 1, which, rather than taking place in Erdonia, will take place at the Siege of Green Navria. So, to give a brief rundown of this chapter, Lucian is in the tower when he sees, approaching across the bridge, the two riders. Going down with his guards to meet them, Lucian discovers the arrival of two persons, one of which he knows, one of which he doesn't. These people are Edmund Adon Otho, the third prince of the Empire Noria, and his counselor slash retainer, a mysterious man named Egenhand. It is told to us that essentially Edmund was once the ward of the Maruli. However, that has long since passed, ever since the Edmund's mother, the Empress Procne, ascended to her current title. So after that, Lucian and the rest of the group go to dinner. The dinner is what follows in Lucian 2. So, as always, we'll begin with the epigraph. So, this epigraph gives a rough rundown of how the empire in Noria is politically constructed, at least centrally. So, there's the capital city of Fair Calais, city of the Eight Spires. And then this is where the emperor in Noria rules from his Red Gold Council. And there are 10 and 9 members of the Red Gold Council, of an upper and lower council, and the five most important are the emperor's right hand of the Grand Magister, essentially the head of the government who is not the emperor. The Magister of War, self-explanatory title. Magister of Metal, this is sort of a court treasurer. The Temple Patriarch, the head of the faith, and the Royal Inquisitor, who is the head of the Inquisition, which has been, I believe, once or twice alluded to previously in the story. If not, we'll get there in a couple of chapters, don't you worry. So, and then this comes from the Norian Way, which is, of course, a mock of the Roman Way, which is another monograph from ancient Rome. So, as always, we start off strong. From the West came two riders, hounded by a windstorm. The windstorm which we saw picking up in Fortuna 1. And here we really get inside Lucian's head for the first time. Lucian, who has been portrayed by Fortuna and Iroh as someone who is more or less obsessed with justice, or this becomes immediately apparent that Lucian is actually concerned with his own position in the world and what he had ought to do. That Lucian, his first thought is that the tower, his bedchamber, isn't actually his, it's his father's. But if his father, Casimir Merula, dies in Green Navria, Lucian will become Lord Merula. And then he will remain Lord Merula until he dies and meets and he bows his neck to be chained by Gemcheek Sortira, which is one of the gods of this world, who is believed by the Norians to be essentially the angel of death, a psychopomp who carries people from the world of the living to the world of the dead, the twilight halls of Dios. As for Sortira is described as gem-cheeked because, being a chthonic deity, she has a gem in each of her cheeks, beneath her eyes. She's portrayed as a beautiful maiden, similar to the Kore statues of ancient Greece. However, is associated with scythes, chains, and a bowl ever leaking water, all symbols of death and mortality. Essentially, Sortira is a composite. Her Sortira, with her name coming from the Latin sors, meaning fate, is essentially a composite of many different Indo-European gods of death in one. So here we have Lucian reading ledgers and scrolls about court records and histories. Essentially, Lucian is a workaholic who takes his job seriously, but the effect of this is something we will see throughout the chapter. So he sees the two riders stop. He notices that the horses are of good quality, and then wonders who they are. Are they messengers? Where are they coming from? Because with the raptors, with these birds that can echo words being sent around the Empire for a communication network, you only entrust messages if you're either too poor to have a raptor, or the message is so secure that you can't have a raptor come. But even then, as we see later, people oftentimes bring raptors for secure messages, but deliver them in person so the recipient can hear the actual words of the person who sends it. So Lucian wonders about this very thing, if the siege had failed and the emperor corpse, a raptor's beak would surely carry that message. And then he goes to his two very Roman named guards, who are there are six household guards as are revealed in this chapter. Uh, two of them are named Cecil and Julianus, and others are like Rubifair and so on. So we have a dichotomy between the two. Julianus is 30-1, and Lucian is rather close with Julianus, that he is a brother and an uncle or somewhere in between. However, Julianus is rather nervous. Later, Cecil says it's because he had lost a week's of he had lost a week's of essentially night shifts and has to do them, but that may not actually be entirely the case. So Lucien explains the situation that there are strange riders. It's very late in the day. He doesn't know who they are, but apparently they're rather important, and they seem to be from a wealthy background based off of the quality of their horses, even from a distance. So perhaps they're asylum seekers, perhaps they're messengers. They're not nightmen, which are essentially day laborers who work at night or come in the night for sort of daily contracts. So they don't know who it is, but Julianus recommends he get two places in the stable, which is a bit curious. If you read the chapter a bit closely, you realize this is a bit just a little bit curious, but that's more for something you to figure out. So Cecil, whereas Julianus is sort of nervous and uptight, Cecil is far, far, far more laid back and relaxed. And Julianus, in fact, is so nervous, so uptight that he forgets his weapon. And Cecil has a little laugh about this, and then they carry on. Um, However, this is an important line, again with the gambling. And then Cecil replies that Talvey isn't just dice. Talvey is essentially like an ancient form of backgammon. They're playing backgammon essentially. Besides, we're not doing it for money, just like you asked. So this tells us something about Lucian and Lucian's structure of governance. Is that Lucian has asked his guards to not gamble, and they are gambling despite his orders, but saying it's fine on a technicality that they aren't gambling for money, but they are in fact gambling for watches or the time they have to spend on shift. So they are still gambling for something which is materially valuable. And this suggests that Lucian is not someone who has his house in order, essentially. His guards are disobeying his orders to his face, and he isn't really able to do much about it. Similarly, in Iro 1, we see there are bandits, or are effectively bandits on the road, and Lucian hasn't control of these. So we have started to get this growing picture that Lucian isn't while Lucian is practicing justice and Lucian seems to be doing his best, Lucian is not someone who actually is running the mandate as effectively as possible, or in a simple sense, Lucian does not have his house in order. So down in the Great Hall, we get some more exposition. We get the Master of Blackbirds motif, which is essentially a man mirrored by two blackbirds, which actually comes from the Master of Animals motif from the ancient Near East, which is usually someone flanked by like two lions or two ibises or two ibexes or any two animals generally, but it's this representation of man's mastery over nature. And we also have the sigil of the Muruli, which is a blackbird between a star and a mountain on a midnight blue sky, which between the stars and the mountains is where Castle Ravencroft is. And then we also get the starry night blue color of the Muruli. And then we have the symbol of the Adenites, which is a chiastic, which is like ABBA. But I didn't want to say quartered, but chiastic is more what it is. And then as nightingales and eucalyptus trees. Nightingales are small brown birds that sing, and eucalyptus trees are large, fragrant trees, which is where we get the name of the fragrant groves, the Adenites' castle. But eucalyptus trees are also incredibly flammable. So there's this idea of perseverance and song despite tragedy, similar to the blood-red field of the Adenite sigil. And then to that right, we have the banner of their color, the Authorids, which are the current ruling dynasty of the Empire Noria. And theirs is half red, half white, which mirrors the colors of the highwaymen from Ira 1, that it seems they were wearing robes. However, notice that red and white could be the color of the Adenites, it could be the color of the Authorids, or it could be the color of both. Now, and then we here have the description of the two-headed grips. That essentially, we know in the past that there's the Republic of Mycenae and the Kingdom of Calais. The Kingdom of Calais conquers Mycenae and enslaves their people, in a mirroring of how Rome enslaves and conquers Carthage way back in the day. Then, however, in this story, the Mycenaeans, 79 years afterwards, rise up, overthrow the Calaeans, and form the Norian Empire, or the Empire in Noria, as they call it. And then the symbol of the symbol of the Kingdom of Clay was a winged lion, so a composite beast. And then the symbol of the Republic of Mycenae was a hawk. It was like a bird and a snake mating, which is also a sort of composite beast. So then together we have the grips, which is a lion with wings and one head of a hawk and one head of a snake. And this is Lucian in fact points out how this symbol is completely made up. So then we also have this idea that Lucian thinks that the grips is wearing a mask. So this could mean a bunch of things. This could mean that that if to get like really analyses, you could say it's like the mask of the authorites is hiding. It's the same empire just under a different head, but also it's that the grips is trying to disguise itself as something different. But then there's also the question of Lucian doesn't actually think of what the symbol means. Lucian just recognizes that it's a symbol. Something that we start picking up in this chapter is that Lucian, although he is perceptive, he is not terribly wise. That Lucian, he is not accustomed to figuring out hidden details, and this is something which will become incredibly more apparent in the next chapter. That Lucian knows his details, but Lucian doesn't often put two and two together, so to speak. And this possibly is the origin of him not having the house in order. So we have the fine red wares, the Eastern Sigillata, if you would, from Old Elon. And so the matching bowls and cups into craters for mixing wine. So with this composite cultures of like the ancient Mediterranean, but also sort of a more medieval aesthetic, which is more or less the aesthetic of the entire Empire in Noria, which is this cross between the ancient Mediterranean, ancient Rome specifically, but also this more sort of medievalized aesthetic where instead of dining in a sort of three parts of a square in a triclinium, we have a banquet hall, but there is no high table here. That they are all dining, and Lucian is best among equals in the setting. There is no high table, there is no lord. However, we do get the idea that if we're to seat 50, perhaps Lucian would then be sitting as Lord at the high table. But for the time being, just Lucian among his own household, there is no high table, either because Lucian is not terribly concerned with looking as a lord, or it is this idea of regal imperial authority is something that Lucian pulls out when he's meeting guests, when he's sitting on the throne. The throne, notably, is not where he's going to be sitting tonight. So Lucian thinks about how there are too few plates, and he must do the guest right hospitality thing. When people come, they ask for food, you give them food, and now you are protected by this reciprocal bond. And this bond exists from cultures where if there is little or a lack of central authority, you need these customs to preserve essentially social cohesion and make sure guests and hosts aren't murdering each other. And then we hear about two relics of the Maruli. The first is the gnarled staff of the rhapsode Cassius Marula, who the gorge is named after. Cassius Marula is the progenitor of the Maruli as a clan. And the second was empty plaque Memthel's Fatal Vision, a reworked orichalcum short sword passed down the Maruli line for 3 long centuries. So orichalcum has been mentioned a couple times. It is the fantasy special metal, and there's reworked orichalcum and true orichalcum. Later we will learn what the exact distinction between these are. So the sword, however, is called Fatal Vision, which is a reference to a thing, and many swords or other special orichalcum weapons throughout the book are reference to this thing. I don't want to give it away though. It's fun. Figure it out for yourself. So here we have this thing where the sword is not present, and instead there's a lyre in its place because Lucian thought it ought to be filled with something. Lucian does not have his house in order. So the people come in. One of them is a man of about 50, but sort of indeterminate age. He looks strange. He has strangely bluish eyes, and he only wears a single black glove on his left hand. It's very strange. Lucien has never seen before. And then we have the second man who is a swan. This other man is a boar. He's stocky, he's broad, he's short, he's a brawler. And this is Edmund, the prince. And Edmund asks his friend to rise, and we see sort of this. He's sort of this like gregarious person who is maybe not fully accustomed to royalty. Maybe we'll see about that. So he's either putting on an act or he like is not terribly accustomed to the trappings of royalty. That like jabbing his thumb, he grinds his hand against his cheek, his beard. He's not someone who seems to be fully like bred into royalty, which based off of Edmund's backstory of Edmund is 24 basically, and he goes away when he's about 11. So because it's been 10 3 years then since they've seen each other. So Edmund has only spent about half his life at the royal court. But he's also older than all of his siblings, where if the Tetrarchy happens 10 and 3 years ago, then the current heir to the throne would be 12 if he was born immediately then. So here we also have a interesting dichotomy between the three POV characters we have so far: Fortuna, Iroh, and Lucien. Lucien is dumbstruck, then falls to his knee. Iroh plays the game very well, falls to a knee, and immediately compliments and gives a beatitude to Edmund, talking about his austere presence. Austere, however, is an interesting choice because you think he'd say august presence, but austere presence is a presence of like to be austere is to be unadorned. So this is odd. Why is Iroh using the specific word instead of august presence? Does he know something we don't? And well, to say a future thing now, yes, he does. And Fortuna places a hand against their heart. It doesn't raise in a full salute. And says Edmund, not Prince, not anything like that, just Edmund. If Iroh is willing to basically prostrate himself for the prince, Fortuna is willing to do nothing of the sort. And Edmund says, at ease, my friends. And then Iroh sees Egenhand, and Egenhand says, we meet in the Alabastron's halls. I wrote them real call me Egenhand. This actually right here is a small typo. That won't be in the future. That won't be in future versions. I don't want to say it too much right now, but there's a certain linguistic tick about Egenhand where he should not actually be using apostrophes. So that will be changed in the future. So to continue, Edmund says, "Come on, what's been 10 3 years?" And we get the phrase, now you're Prince of the Empire Doria, a son of a god, which Filus Dei, which is a title of the Roman emperors, and Lord over the earth. So, but Edmund is the son of a god, which means that Tychon Otho is considered a living god, the living saint, more or less. And then Lord of the Earth is the title of Tychon Otho, one of his many titles. Is Tychon Otho is just a man. If he's just a man, I'm just a boy. And have less of a line to the throne. And then we hear about Kenta, which we later learn is back in the day, when Iroh was betrothed to Fortuna, Edmund was ward of the Maruli and betrothed to Kanta. And then that all got thrown out the window when Edmund's mom became empress. And then we hear of this fun little turn of phrase that a familiar is both like a close companion, Megaira. Meg is actually named after Megaira, one of the three Furies, but a familiar is also a term for a witch's familiar, the animal that a witch falls around a witch. So then here we have this interesting. So Kenta, a character we have not met yet, but will meet in a future chapter, is lordly, sort of has a witchy aesthetic, and is also a bookworm. So she's essentially sort of like Lucien, sort of like Iroh, sort of like neither of them. And then Iroh's gaze follows Fortuna and flashes back to Egenhand, and Lucien does not understand what this means. And this is Iroh sort of like having one last moment with Fortuna and then going back to Egenhand, who is this man that deeply, deeply confounds Iroh, because why the hell is Egenhand here? This man who Iroh has coincidentally met in his past when he was studying in Verkale and now is here. And what's going on? Why is a member of the Red Gold Council here? And why is it specifically one that Iroh knows? What's going on? This is all really strange. And then Edmund asks, "Are you wed? Have you done political marriages?" So this shows that although Edmund has presented himself who is not terribly concerned about the trappings of royalty, Edmund is very concerned about royal matters, such as political marriages. And um, Lucian says, "Oh yeah, no, there are a few people we thought of: the daughters of Lords of Vulpin once they become of age, and the daughter of Lord Helster." Except Iroh then reveals that Lord Helster's daughter is married to Lord Geralt Bagarion, the Emperor's left leg and Magistrate Hunt. So Lucian, although he seems to have some knowledge of potential political marriages, isn't actually being kept up to date with things. Lucian's house is not in order. In fact, Iroh reveals that it was before the campaign began, and so it seems they were married right before they actually all walked off to Green Navria from Fairclay, and it's a long walk. And then Edmund says, "Well, you've joined the August Order of Rooks. Do you think you spent 4 whole years living under my nose?" So this proves it. Iroh and Edmund have met in the past. At some point in the past year, while Iroh was still studying in Fairclay, he and Edmund met. So Edmund, however, whether or not Edmund knew Iroh would be coming back, probably not, because, well, Iroh leaves 20 days ago. He arrives on the 20th day, as he says in 1401, and he's a single guy on a horse, and Edmund and Egenhand are two people, and Edmund's prince, so he's probably riding with some more retainers because he's not like doing the whole I'm royalty, but I'm traveling the country to sign secret thing. So he must have then left before Iroh and Egenhand, so he didn't know Iroh was going to be here. So this is surprising as for him as it is for Iroh, probably. So they say we have dinner. Is Amnia still here? I sure hope she could whip up one of those honey clouds, which is like a honey meringue type thing. That's Edmund is evoking their childhood, but Edmund doesn't seem to be the same person he was in the past. And then they hug. "I've missed you. I've missed you, my prince." And then Lucian says, "It's Lord Castle Ravencroft. I have to seek justice in all things, and I fear a storm is coming our way." So Lucian is obsessed with sort of a deontic perspective, but in a different way than Iroh. Whereas Iroh thinks about how the world should be, Lucian thinks about how he should be, how he should act, and he might not be getting it right, basically. Next time, we're going to go over Ekin 1, which is a doozy of a chapter. I really like it. See you all then. Bye.